What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to yet another variety build here on the channel. And I am so excited to be bringing you yet another variety build for the month of April. This month, we are going to be going with a sniper build, which I know is kind of interesting, but I wanted to really pull out all of the stops and build a Nova type build for you to be able to shoot from really far away and deal as much damage as possible. And so I came up with a really interesting way to do that, and I wanted to go over that with you today. Before we do that though, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, most people who watch the channel are not subscribed, so please don't be one of those people. Help us to reach our goal of 5,000 by the end of this year. I think we can do it, but I need your help in order to get there. And of course, make sure to click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded, and share the video with your friends. In addition, please consider joining the channel. Just like all of my other builds from my How Do I Want to Do This series, as well as my subclass fixes, those are all available for you in a nice little write-up that you can of course keep forever by just joining the channel. It of course $2 per month gets you at the bronze tier, and that will get you all of those write-ups, and you can of course download those, keep those, use those at your table, whatever you want to do. And so that is going to be great. Of course, silver members and above get a shout out each week, so there you go. There is the shout out for all of my silver members. Thank you so much for being here and for supporting the channel. I really appreciate you. Also, the silver members got this a day early as well, so a lot of really good perks there. Finally, at the gold tier, you get priority picks on the variety builds. And so this was actually just a suggestion that I was wanting to work on. This is a build I've been working on for a while. I actually built this for a friend, but we'll get into this here in just a little bit. And so if you want something specific to show up in next month's variety build, you can just let me know at that gold tier. That tier additionally will be getting some more features as time goes on, but for now, that is what it comes with. So again, thank you to all of my members at all levels. I really appreciate your support. And so let's go ahead and jump into this build. So where did this build come from? Why do I have this ready to go? This build actually comes from a request from someone who is at the table with me for our currently is Wild Beyond the Witchlight. We just finished up Strahd a few months ago. She was there for that as well. And so she is in an online campaign, and she wanted a specific kind of theme and wanted me to build around that. She wanted something that could deal a lot of damage. She wanted a burst type of build, but she wanted it to be kind of an assassin, but also well trained. And so I had some decent amount of theming to work with here. And I ended up coming up with today's build. And honestly, it's kind of nuts. I don't normally make builds in order for them to be necessarily optimized for damage. I normally go for flavor over the mechanical benefits. This time I kind of threw that out the window and really just went for damage. And so I think you'll see what I mean once I get into this build. I think you're going to really like this if you're somebody who just likes having really high damage numbers. So with all that out of the way, let's jump in. Starting off, as always, we have our race, and there are a few options that we could go with here. I will say that for this build, our honorable mention section is going to be very, very short because this build was something that I had already kind of worked through. But as far as other options go, you could always go with the custom lineage and the gunner feat if you wanted to. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that route. I would rather go a different way of doing this. It does mean that your progression is going to be a little bit slower, but our damage overall is going to be a little bit higher. And so I'm going to take that route instead. I'm going to go for the higher damage route. And so with that, we're going to go with the Bugbear. The Bugbear is, of course, a fantastic race. We used it several times when we were talking about the Monk on the channel, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. We get, of course, a few features that are super helpful on this, though. Number one, we get Sneaky, which gives us proficiency in stealth checks, which is fantastic. We are going to want to be pretty stealthy in order to get into our position that we want to shoot from. We are a sniper after all, and if we get found out before we take the shot, what's the point, right? So that is going to definitely be helpful. But even more so, we have Surprise Attack. Surprise Attack says that before our opponent gets to move for the first time in an initiative order, we get to do 2d6 extra damage every time that we make an attack against it. So that can really stack up if we're making a lot of attacks, right? Because that is every single attack that we make on that very first turn, as long as our initiative is higher than our opponent. So this gives us kind of a clear direction of how we want to proceed from here. We want to get a lot of attacks, and we want to make sure that we are going early in initiative if we can help it. And so we're going to make sure that we can find ways in order to help ourselves going forward in order to achieve that goal. Now, going this race does present us with an interesting problem in that we do not technically start out with firearm proficiency. Now, this will be something to talk to your DM about because firearms are technically martial weapons. So technically, if you want to make the argument that, you know, you have proficiency with a musket because it is technically a ranged martial weapon and your DM goes for that, that's fine. If you need explicit firearm proficiency in order to use a firearm, we're going to fix that in this build too. So either way is fine. You just may have to change a little bit here at the beginning, but we'll discuss that here in just a second. As for our stats, of course, we're using our modified standard array as always. For you, if you're using a different type of point system, whether it's point by, regular standard array, rolled stats, anything like that, just prioritize the stats in the same order that I do. So we're going to put our top stat into our dexterity. Next is going to be constitution, then wisdom, and then after that, it really doesn't matter. We need constitution, of course, not only for hit points, which are going to be helpful, but we also may or may not have a spell that we want to maintain concentration on, and so we don't want to drop that. I will say that you dropping concentration is probably not going to be that much of a concern on this build, if at all. So I don't think that we necessarily need to make a huge deal out of making sure that our constitution is up for that reason. It's more so just for the hit points, which, I mean, if we're not getting hit, we don't need those either. But either way, I still want to have at least a decent amount in case something goes wrong. It is going to be a nice little backup for us in case we need it. Now, as for our equipment, we have an interesting dilemma. So at this point, I would love to have a musket and I would love to be able to use it. However, we technically don't have firearm proficiency, but we do have martial weapon proficiency. So again, that's a DM thing. Also, muskets are incredibly expensive. And so for either of those reasons, you may not be able to use a musket here starting out. If that's the case, I would probably use a heavy crossbow for now, and then eventually get to a musket once you can afford it / have proficiency specifically with firearms. That's something to talk to your DM about, of course. Some will allow you to do it, some will not, but of course, that's going to be different at each table. So yeah, take a heavy crossbow if you can't use the firearm for now. And then, of course, purchase or build or whatever you want the story to be with a musket once you actually have access to that. And it won't be until level 4 where it starts making a difference. And so hopefully in those first 4 levels, you can, work something out to where you can get a hold of something like that. Of course, also take some studded leather armor, just the best light armor that you can possibly get, just to help us out with our AC as much as possible. We are going to have a really good dexterity score, and so that's going to really, really bump us up when it comes to AC, when it comes to light armor. So we don't need anything heavier than this, and that feels really good. So I think we're starting off really, really strong. All right, let's start taking some levels now. And at level 1, I'm going to start off with Ranger. Now, you may be thinking, okay, Dapper, why not start with Fighter? And I will say that starting off with Fighter is not a bad option here. Of course, Fighter comes with a fighting style right off the bat where we could just pick up archery and be good there. But at the same time, like I said before, I don't think that having Constitution saving throw proficiency is nearly as important on this build as it would be most others, just because we're hoping to keep so much distance between ourselves and our enemies. So I'm not really concerned about it. And so I would rather go through this kit and pick up some really cool features from Ranger first, and then come back to Fighter later. And I think it's fine. We don't need the armor proficiency. We don't get anything better or worse because of the weapon proficiencies, because it's still just simple and martial weapons. So really, I think Ranger is just going to end up working out better for us overall. And that's actually pretty cool. That helps us to mix things up just a little bit. So of course at Ranger 1, we get Favored Foe, which is terrible. And we also get Canny, which Canny I would go ahead and stick on our stealth checks. This of course gives us basically half expertise. So you can double your proficiency bonus with that skill. Stealth is going to be huge for us because we are going to, of course, be shooting for not only moving first, but also being unseen. And this will play out a little bit further once we get deeper into this character. But you definitely are going to want stealth proficiency and stealth expertise as quickly as you possibly can. At level 2, we're of course going to continue in Ranger, and now we get a fighting style. And of course, now we're going to pick up archery. It makes no sense to go with any other fighting style for this. Archery is just basically one of the best fighting styles in the game, and it gives you a flat +2 bonus to hit on ranged weapon attacks, which is huge for us. It is going to help your overall damage average because of the bonus to hit. Of course, if you miss, your damage is 0, right? So you want to make sure you're hitting as often as possible. This helps, especially with a big penalty that we're going to be taking later on with a certain feat. I mean, you all knew it was coming. It's not very spoilery to say that. At this level, we also get spell casting, and really my biggest concern is just picking up Hunter's Mark. Hunter's Mark, of course, allows us to deal extra damage every time that we hit the target that is affected by this. It gives us a couple of other benefits, but we're really here just for the extra damage. That's the main reason why we're here. And you also, of course, can pick up like Cure Wounds or something else that helps you to be a better team player. But let's be real, this build is all about being selfish and dealing a bunch of damage, so do what you want besides that. At level 3, we of course get to pick our subclass, and I think surprising absolutely no one, we are going to go with the Gloomstalker Ranger. The Gloomstalker, of course, gives us so many amazing features. We get Primal Awareness, which is not a subclass feature, but it's fine. But we also get Dread Ambusher and Umbral Sight. Dread Ambusher is playing perfectly into the theme that we were already trying to work with, right? And it is having a really, really good first turn of combat. With this, we can add our wisdom modifier to our initiative. So our initiative bonus just went up. We've got a really good dex score. Now we're adding our wisdom as well. So we've got a really good bonus to our initiative, which is fantastic. We also get an increased move speed. We deal extra damage on an extra attack that we make on that first turn as well. So for all of those things, we are setting up to have a really, really strong first turn of combat. And that's really what makes this build so good, is that there's no setup round. You walk in and round 1 is your Nova round, and you just go nuts and blow all of your resources. And we're going to be getting a bunch more resources to blow as we go forward. But yeah, this is really, really nice. We also, of course, get Umbral Sight, and Umbral Sight is deceivingly good as well. Not only do we get really good dark vision, but we also are going to be able to be invisible in darkness as long as the other creature relies on dark vision in order to see us. So of course this won't get around like blind sight or anything like that. But if we are in darkness and another creature has to use dark vision in order to see us, we are invisible, which means advantage on all of our attacks. That's kind of insane, right? Especially when we consider how many attacks we are trying for later on, the fact that it increases our chance for critical hits. Just for all of those reasons, this is especially dangerous. And of course, we've got a really good bonus to stealth. So for all of that, we're probably going to be able to get away with a lot of sneaky things, and it feels really good. At Ranger 4, we of course get our first ASI or feat, and we're going to go ahead and just grab the Gunner feat. The Gunner feat not only goes ahead and boosts up our dexterity score, but it also gives us straight up proficiency with firearms in case you didn't have that before, in case your DM didn't allow you to use firearms before. This goes ahead and gets around that. We also can now fire from point blank range without suffering disadvantage, which is pretty good. We ignore the loading property, which is the most important thing, honestly. You know, we're allowed to make that extra attack as a Gloomstalker Ranger, but technically we have to do the loading property. And so that holds us back, right? Now we can get around that. And so, yeah, it's a level late. but it's okay. It ends up getting us around this. So at this point, we definitely want a firearm, because ignoring the loading property is only for firearms with the gunner feat. It does not go over to bows. And so we definitely need to switch over so that we can actually get the most out of this feat. Of course, if you have to use a pistol for now, it's fine. I would much rather use a musket though, just because of the higher damage die that it uses. At Ranger 5, we of course get extra attack, and this of course allows you to attack twice within one action. Of course, we just mitigated the loading property holding us back, so we're good to make 2 attacks for that. And on the very first turn, we can make a 3rd attack, which of course gets the bonus from the Dread Ambusher, and all 3 attacks have a 2d6 bonus from us being a bugbear. So we're doing really well, again, as long as we did really well on our initiative, but we have a really good bonus to initiative at the same time. We also get 2nd level spells at this level, and my top picks are Aid, Pass Without Trace, Lesser Restoration, and maybe Magic Weapon. Magic Weapon is kind of an iffy one, to be honest, but you know, it is what it is. Whatever you want to do. Pass Without Trace and Lesser Restoration are really the big ones to me, just because we can, of course, get really stealthy. Yet again, we're looking for big bonuses to stealth, and Lesser Restoration is always nice in case some kind of a nasty effect comes your way. So yeah, we're doing really well so far. This is a really potent kit just as it is, but I think that we can make it a little more potent if we do some multi-classing. And so at this point, our character may have been working for him or herself, maybe a bounty hunter, maybe just doing some stuff out on their own, just kind of chilling. And so now is the time that your character seeks some formal training. And so now we are going to take some fighter levels. At Fighter 1, we of course get our fighting style, and I'm going to take Superior Technique here. This is going to give us a couple of maneuvers that we can use from the Battlemaster subclass, as well as a D6 superiority die, which is going to be really helpful. We can use this on a couple of different maneuvers. I would probably take either Menacing Attack, or I would possibly even take Ambush. Ambush is nice because it can help you if you roll really poorly on an initiative check. Or of course, Menacing Attack can cause a fear effect, which can also be pretty effective in that way. We of course also get Second Wind, which is a nice little bonus action heal. It's not going to scale all that well, probably. It just depends on how we end up at the end here, which I'll talk about that here in a few levels. At level 7, we're going to be a Fighter 2, and we get Action Surge. So now we of course can take 2 actions in 1 turn. This means we're making a lot of attacks during our Nova round here on the very first round. So we of course attack once, twice with extra attack, and a 3rd time with Dread Ambusher. Then we of course can do it all again with Action Surge, because with Dread Ambusher, it just says if you take the attack action, right? Which means if you take the attack action twice, then you can do this twice. All of those attacks are going to have the Bugbear added on to extra damage with the surprise attack, and 2 of those are going to have the extra damage added on from Dread Ambusher. So we're dealing a lot of damage. At Fighter 3, we of course get to choose our subclass, and I'm going Battlemaster. I mean, Battlemaster makes the most sense to me because it gives us a lot of opportunities to deal extra damage, and it gives us a lot of really cool like spell-like effects that we can do. And I really like that. I think that's really helpful. So with this, of course, I'm going to take either Ambush or Menacing Attack, whichever one we didn't take before. I would also take Precision Attack here. And honestly, I think it's more worth using one of my D8s to make sure that the attack lands, rather than necessarily worrying about whether or not I got to use it to deal extra damage. Overall, you're gonna miss attacks. It's gonna happen. We're gonna be using a feat here in a couple levels that is going to make it harder for us to hit. And so we're gonna miss. It's gonna happen, and that's okay. So just kind of work with it, do the best that you can with it, and it'll be all right. But this gives us kind of a backup option to make sure that we are hitting a little bit more consistently, which is good. And of course, if we hit, we're just going to use these to deal extra damage. And so for the 3rd option for maneuvers, I would just pick your favorite that does deal extra damage. Whichever one you want is totally fine. Probably not Trip Attack, just because that'll give you disadvantage on your attacks if it falls prone. But pretty much most of the rest of them are going to be fine as long as they deal damage. At level 9, we're going to get our 2nd ASI or feat, and man, it has been way too long having to wait until we get this, but we finally get sharpshooter. This is going to just take our damage and just skyrocket it as we add plus 10 damage to each of those 6 attacks that we were making before, which is insane. It's just fantastic. So we're adding basically a plus 15 to every single attack that we are making because of sharpshooter plus our dexterity modifier. Then we're adding our bugbear damage, we're adding our dread ambusher damage to 2 of those, we're adding our battlemaster maneuvers to 4 of those. It's fantastic. It's so good. Technically we could add it to 5 if we had taken menacing attack as part of the initial one, but one of those would be a d6 and the other 4 would be a d8. But either way is totally fine. But yeah, we're dealing a lot of damage. But now we end up at a spot where I think we're going to end up plateauing if we keep with fighter, which is unfortunate, right? So I've got to find a way to keep this damage going to make sure that we don't just get stuck at any point in the build. And so we're going to multi-class again. And so now maybe you have gotten to the point where you feel like you've completed your formal training for now, and it's time to maybe you get tied up with some kind of criminal underbelly type of situation, and you go to the dark side of the law. Anyway, we're going to take rogue levels now, and this is really awesome. When my friend asked for this, I believe her character is a royal guard, and so it kind of made sense. It used to be a bounty hunter for hire, and then underwent some formal training, and now is kind of the secret assassin of the king, or at least for the king. And so this kind of all fit that story that she was trying to create. So at Rogue 1, we are going to get expertise, sneak attack, and thieves cant. For your expertise, I would probably take perception and then one other skill of your choice. It really doesn't matter. As long as we have expertise in perception and stealth, we're going to be doing just fine for what we need. So I'm cool with whatever else you want to do. Sneak attack, of course, is going to give us yet another 1d6 damage that we can deal once per turn, and that's going to feel really good as well as we can do that. And we're going to be getting sneak attack pretty reliably, I would think, with this character, so that's also really nice. At Rogue 2, we're going to take Cunning Action, and this is going to give us a bunch of stuff that we can do on our bonus action. So this does make us a little bit more reliable as we level up and get beyond that initial turn. The initial turn, of course, we're going to be casting Hunter's Mark, but after that, our bonus action is pretty free. And so now we can do, dash, disengage, hide if we want to. And of course, the hide action can be really good, especially if we can get into the darkness. We have a really good stealth proficiency, and that can lead to some pretty easy advantage in the future, which again is more sneak attack. So it all works together. Then at Rogue 3, we of course get to choose our subclass. And normally I would run from this subclass kicking and screaming and just not want to pick it, but it makes too much sense here for what not only she was going for, but also just the theme that we're going for here. And that's the Assassin Rogue. The Assassin Rogue is normally incredibly unreliable because surprise is something that is so rare in D&D that it's just, to me, it's not something that I would normally consider when I'm looking at any combat situation. I do not normally consider this to be something that I'm even interested in. However, in this case, we have a massive range. We can deal a ton of damage. We're incredibly sneaky. We lurk in the shadows. Maybe getting surprised won't be nearly as difficult on this kind of a build. I think that you will be able to get it reliably on this character way more than you would most others. Even just straight rogues, I think you're going to be able to get the sneak attack. I think you're going to be able to get the assassinate to actually activate way more on a build like this than pretty much any other one. And so for all of those reasons, I really think that this is the time to take Assassin Rogue. Of course, with Assassinate, if the target is surprised, then we can just crit. And critting on this, because we're already rolling so many dice, is going to lead to a very swift death of whatever target you are going after. And we will go after some damage numbers here in just a second, but this is kind of the turning point for this build, where this build really skyrockets in how much damage that it can do. And it's all because of just how this all works, right? Because we can fire from so far away, we can probably get a decent amount of surprise as long as we aren't trying to approach anybody, which why would we need to, right? If you're trying to be covert about it, you can set up on a nearby hill, you can hide in the bushes, you can get away with whatever you want to do and then get out with your bonus action dash if you need to. And so with the surprise going on, this goes nuts. So let's talk about how much damage we're doing. To me, this is where the build kind of peaks, and it's really hard to not plateau after this level. And I'll just say, I do think that this build does plateau after this level, and we'll talk about what to do about it. But yeah, at this point, I think this is kind of our highlight in relation to what we will be facing. I think this is really the best that we're going to be in relation to what we are going to be fighting. So with this, of course, whenever we make attacks, we're going to try to get surprise if possible. I'm not going to rely on that for this number, but if we can get surprise, that'd be great. Otherwise, we're going to try to get advantage at least as we fire from darkness, and that could be really, really helpful. If not, at least make sure that you can hit your target, right? And so we're going to be dealing, assuming we hit our attacks, 1d12 for the musket, plus a flat 10 for sharpshooter, a flat 5 for our dexterity modifier, 2d6 for surprise attack, 1d8 for one of our maneuvers. We have 1d6 then, of course, for our hunter's mark as well. And then we can just keep doing that, right? We do that again for extra attack. We get our extra third attack for Dread Ambusher, which gets a bonus d8 from it. We then action surge and do all of that again, although we are only going to be able to add one more d8 from our maneuvers because we're going to run out of superiority dice, unfortunately. But yeah, we're doing 6 attacks plus all of the dice that we are rolling. Let's just say with this, if you're looking at something that has a 17 or lower armor class, you're looking at an average of over 200 damage. It's just how the numbers work out, which is just insane. A 17 armor class, while that's not insanely high at this level, it's still nothing to sneeze at. And I really think that, you know, if you're taking out a decently high level target, if it's got an AC around this level, I'm just going to be using sharpshooter on everything. I'm just going to just knock this thing out in one go. And you can even knock out a boss monster with this if it doesn't have enough hit points to go around for this, which is just nuts. And if nothing else, you'll at least soften it severely. If you were to get surprise, this number goes over 300. And that's what's kind of insane, is that you can deal over 300 damage in a single turn. And that's on average too. You can deal much higher than that if you happen to roll really well. But on average, you're still going to be dealing more than 300 damage should you get surprise with your assassinate feature, which is just nuts. And that's why I really like this build. I think this build is just insane. I think that it allows you to roll so many dice. And I even put this in my build guide. Of course, make sure you join the channel if you want to see that. But I put in here that one of the biggest weaknesses is just how much time it's going to take you to roll all of the dice that you need to roll. So you'll probably have to come up with some kind of a system to make sure that you are rolling the correct dice at the correct time. But yeah, your damage numbers are insane, absolutely insane. Let's keep moving on here, actually. And so we're going to now get a 4th level of Rogue. And so at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and bump our wisdom. Bumping wisdom, of course, is going to give us a little bit of extra help when we go to like cure wounds. It's going to give us a bonus to our initiative because that's tied to Dread Ambusher. For all of those things, I think that's really helpful in order to have a higher wisdom score, which feels really, really nice. We then are going to reach kind of the brick wall for this build. Like I said, this build begins to plateau really at this level. And it's hard to figure out what to do about it. So I've got 4 different ways that you can do this. I'm going to basically present the way that I think that I would go if I'm going to level 20, but I'm going to present some other options for you. Number 1, if you're going to level 20, then I think we go back to fighter and we stay there the rest of the way. And that way we end up picking up improved combat superiority and another attack once we get to level 20. Although it takes until level 20. And really we are plateauing until that point. We really aren't getting any extra damage. We're not really dealing a whole lot more. We will get some more superiority dice, but it's not going to be enough of an improvement to where I'm making a huge deal out of it. You could, of course, go with more rogue levels. Now, I will say that the rogue features that you're going to get are not that exciting. Really, all we care about is the extra sneak attack damage, which of course is only once per turn. And so that's why I kind of like going possibly the fighter route, because on average, you're probably going to be better off that way, but not necessarily. So the rogue option is also possible. You could go more into Ranger, and you could go Ranger all the way out. You would, of course, get some better spells. You, of course, would be a lot more well-rounded as a character, I will say. Not necessarily helping your damage, but you would just be a better D&D character in general. So if you want to be more well-rounded, I would go back to Gloomstalker and just go there the rest of the way. Eventually, you'll get some really good features toward the end, which aren't too bad. But overall, I think fighter is going to be the best thing for our damage. Unless, one little like hybrid way you could do this, if you do not have a magical gun at this point, you might want to consider taking one level of Forge Cleric. Forge Cleric could, of course, give us a +1 bonus to our gun. And so that gives us a bonus to hit and a bonus to damage on each of those attacks. The bonus to damage isn't that huge, but the bonus to actually hit means that we are just going to be effective at higher and higher enemy armor classes, and that +1 can really make a difference. So if you are still using a non-magical musket at this point, I would take a level in Forge Cleric and then move on and probably go Gloomstalker or Rogue. If you're going to miss out on the final way of getting extra attack, I probably wouldn't go fighter at all. Just because I don't think that improved combat superiority is great as a capstone feature. I think you need that extra attack to make it worth your while. But for us, we are going to go with the fighter route because we will get that extra attack at level 20. So that's what we're going to do. We then at fighter 5 will get extra attack, which does absolutely nothing for us. We then at fighter 6 get another ASI or feat. I'm going to take Resilient Constitution. This gives us a +1 in Constitution, and it is going to give us proficiency in that saving throw. Again, we only have Strength and Dex saving throw proficiency at this point because we started Ranger. This will help us if we were to get hit and our Hunter's Mark was in a possible threat of being dropped. This would help us out with that. It's more so to just, I don't like odd numbers, and so I'd rather just shore that up and just be done with it. So that feels a lot better for me. At fighter 7, we get Know Your Enemy, which is fine. I mean, it's okay, right? We talked about this a lot when I actually talked about the Battlemaster fighter a long time ago. And it's okay. It's an okay feature. We then get another ASI or feat at fighter 8. I probably would bump Wisdom again at this point just to get another bonus, not only to help us with our spell casting, but also to give us another bonus to our initiative. So that's now a +9 bonus to initiative, which feels really good, right? I think that's fantastic. We then at fighter 9 we get Indomitable, so we can reroll a saving throw, which is pretty good. We then at fighter 10 we get improved combat superiority, so now our dice are no longer D8s, they are D10s, which feels really good. Definitely will help with the damage overall. And finally, fighter 11, level 20, we are going to get our second round of extra attack. So we now can Hunter's Mark and make 8 attacks during our burst round, which is going to feel really, really good. So what do you think of this build? Do you think this is the ultimate sniper, or is there a better way to build this build? Like I said, we're not going to really do honorable mentions today just because this is a build that I already had pre-built, but I would love to know your suggestions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to let me know what you would like to see in next month's variety build. The verdict is still out on what we are going to build, and maybe your idea will be the next one, or you could join the channel at the gold level and confirm that your suggestion is going to the top of the list. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Next week, we're going to be starting our series talking about the Paladin, so you're not going to want to miss that. Until then, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.